Hi bakers, welcome back to my kitchen. Today you are in for a real treat. We are making a chocolate donut cake. So if you're following me along on Instagram, you might know that I kind of have a thing for donut cakes. I've made a old-fashioned donut cake, a powdered sugar donut cake, an apple cider donut cake, a frosted sugar cake donut cake. But today we are making my favorite cake of all, which is a chocolate donut cake. It's just like a giant donut. It's made in a bundt pan, and then we flip it over and add a glaze. It's absolutely delicious, fun for the whole family to enjoy. It's perfect for birthdays, holidays, or any day you decide you want to have a fun, sweet treat. So our brown butter is all done. What a beauty. Amazing. Just like magic, you guys. Before we get started, let's talk about the equipment and the ingredients that you need to make this cake. First, you're gonna wanna start with a really large bowl. I'll get more into this in just a minute, but basically we're using a lot of flour and cocoa powder for this recipe, and when you add them to the bowl, they tend to go flying out all over your kitchen counter to make a huge mess. So by using a big, deep bowl, you'll avoid that issue altogether. We're also gonna use a hand mixer, and we have a 10 to 12 cup bundt pan. This one's really nice, simple design. When you flip it over, it turns out really pretty, but you can use any bundt pan that you like as long as it's 10 to 12 cups. Now for your ingredients, we're gonna use a lot of basic ingredients that we would use for any cake. We have our all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, we have Dutch processed cocoa powder. I also really like to use Hershey's Special Dark. That's great for this recipe. We have 2 sticks of unsalted butter. We have a little bit of milk, which we're actually gonna turn into our homemade buttermilk. We have some sour cream, 3 eggs, there's vanilla, baking powder and baking soda, and then we have salt, cardamom, and a little bit of nutmeg. Our final ingredient is a 1/2 cup of hot water, which we're gonna use at the very end of the mixing process. To our large bowl, we're going to add 2 sticks of unsalted butter. This butter is at room temperature, so it's been sitting out for about an hour. And I like to use unsalted butter because we are adding salt to the recipe, and by using unsalted butter, you can control the amount of salt that goes into your cake. Okay, so we have our butter added, and we are going to go ahead and add in our granulated sugar right into the bowl. We're gonna mix our sugar and butter together for about 3 to 4 minutes. So we're mixing together our butter and granulated sugar until it's light and fluffy. This takes about 3 to 4 minutes with your mixer on medium speed. And this is so that we get a nice creamy texture to start off our batter, which is gonna give us a delightful texture to our cake. It's starting to get nice and soft, nice and fluffy. It's a nice light pale color. And you can start to see that the sugar sort of dissolving into that butter, so it's a little bit less grainy than when we first started mixing. Make sure that you mix for the full 3 to 4 minutes because you want this mixture to be nice and light and fluffy. Okay, I'm just gonna bump up that speed a little bit at the end here to finish off this creaming process. It's looking great, and I think it's ready. Yes, that looks terrific. And we're gonna go ahead now and add our eggs. So we have 3 large eggs, gonna go right into the bowl, and we're gonna mix them in one at a time. So there is our first egg. Let's give that a mix. The eggs are gonna give this cake some nice structure, and they also help to give the cake a nice bit of rise along with your leavening agents. So that's why we're using 3 full eggs in the cake. Okay, that one is just about fully mixed in, so we're gonna go ahead and add our second egg right into the bowl. Perfect. So our batter is now starting to turn a really pretty yellow color, like a pale yellow. And looks delicious, nice and fluffy, super soft and creamy. You can also make this cake in a stand mixer if you prefer, because there is a little bit of mixing at first, but it does tend to get a little bit messy once you add the flour and cocoa powder, which is why I like to use a large bowl and hand mixer. Okay, our last egg is going in. Here we go. And gonna give that one mix quickly here. You wanna mix the egg in just until you get those golden streaks of yolk to disappear, and then you can stop mixing. Perfect, that's great right there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my vanilla extract now. This is gonna help give our cake some really delicious depth of flavor, which is really important for baked goods. So we'll mix that in. Perfect. Okay, so you might notice at this point that your cake batter is starting to look a little bit split or curdled. I'm gonna give you a peek. You can kind of see. And that's because when we added our eggs, that can sometimes happen. Don't worry one bit. When you start to add the dry ingredients back into the batter, everything will come back together nicely. Okay, we're gonna give this another little mix here. Okay, so for our dry ingredients, we have our all-purpose flour, we have Dutch processed cocoa powder, and this is sifted before weighing. And then we also have our salt, cardamom, nutmeg, which gives it that really delicious old-fashioned donut flavor. And then we have baking powder and baking soda. So I'm gonna actually grab a larger bowl because this one's a little bit small. And we're gonna put our flour right in there. And then we're gonna add the cocoa powder. Come on, all of you. And then we've got our nutmeg, cardamom, and salt. Baking powder. Come on. And we've got our baking soda. Okay, I'm just gonna grab a whisk and quickly whisk this together so we get all of those dry ingredients incorporated nicely before we add them to our wet ingredients. And see, it's already starting to go all over the place. That's the trouble with cocoa powder. It has a mind of its own, and it loves to be messy in the kitchen. So we're gonna alternate our dry ingredients with the sour cream and also our homemade buttermilk. So let's talk about the buttermilk for just a second. This is actually just whole milk in a measuring cup, and it's a half of a cup. So I'm gonna go ahead and take out about 2 teaspoons of this milk. And then we're gonna add in about 2 teaspoons of the lemon juice, fresh lemon juice. And we're gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes, and it will start to curdle, and it will act exactly like buttermilk does. So this way you won't have to keep buttermilk in your refrigerator for this recipe. So let's go ahead and add in that lemon juice. I'm just gonna give this a quick slice. And you can measure this at home if you like. I'm just gonna eyeball it. We just need a little bit of lemon juice in here. That looks perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna set that aside. I might just give it a quick stir with a fork just to kind of get the curdling process going. And then we'll let that sit for about 5 minutes and it'll be good to go. Okay, so it's time to finish our batter. Our buttermilk is all ready to go. It's looking nice and curdled. So we're gonna pull our wet ingredients right back over here, and we are gonna start by adding a little bit of our dry ingredients to the batter. So we're just gonna, told you. I told you this was gonna happen. Okay, this is a little bit of a messy endeavor, but it's all gonna be worth it. So I'm just gonna make this come together slowly on low speed, trying to keep as much of this cocoa powder in the bowl as possible. We are not looking to mix all of the wet and dry ingredients together here. We're just looking to get it started. That looks perfect. So I'm gonna stop right there, and then I'm gonna add a little drizzle of our buttermilk. You can see it's nice and curdled as it goes in. Perfect. I'm gonna give that a mix. Keep your mixer on low speed at all times because you're either gonna have buttermilk flying out of the bowl or cocoa powder. And if you are using a stand mixer, you might wanna try the trick where you literally wrap your stand mixer in plastic wrap while you're mixing. Okay, that looks great. We're gonna go ahead and add in some of our sour cream. I'm just gonna do a nice healthy dollop there. Save some for the next batch. Again, keeping your mixer on low speed. We're just looking to combine this a little bit, not fully. Perfect. Okay, and then we're gonna go in with another round of our dry ingredients. And I'm going to reserve a little bit of our dry ingredients for the very end. So when you're working with your batches of additions here, you always wanna make sure that you end with a little bit of the dry ingredients. So back on low speed. This is looking so chocolatey. It's going to be so delicious when it comes out of the oven. This is a really moist, delicious cake, thanks to both the buttermilk and the sour cream. So good. Okay, you can tell this is getting nice and thickened here. Beautiful batter. So we're gonna go ahead and add in the rest of our buttermilk. Set that aside and woo! Low speed, low speed. Don't be in a hurry with this cake. Take your time with this mixing process and make sure that you don't overmix your batter. Okay, that looks perfect. I can see just a little bit of buttermilk still lingering in the bowl, so I'm gonna stop there. And we're gonna add the rest of our sour cream in. Oops. Making sure you get every last bit. Every last bit, all of it in. Okay, here we go. One more mix with this, and then we're gonna add the last of our dry ingredients into the bowl. And then we're gonna do a really fun final step that really makes this batter just shine. It's so good. Okay, that's perfect. I'm gonna stop right there, and then we're gonna take the last of our dry ingredients right into the bowl. And here we're going to mix just until a few streaks of flour remain in the bowl. You don't want to overmix this, or you're going to get a really dense, really tough cake that's not light and fluffy. And we are going for light and fluffy. So make sure you do not overmix. Can't say that enough. I know I sound like a broken record. But you don't want to overmix your batter. Okay, we're almost there. You can see a little bit of cocoa powder over here still. I'm going to make sure we get every corner, trying to get into the bottom of the bowl. This is a lot of batter, so you definitely want to make sure you're working all parts of the bowl. Perfect. So let me show you. You can see how nice and thick that is. So delicious. I really want to lick one of those, but I won't. And you can see here is our delicious chocolate donut cake batter. So good. It is taking all of the willpower in the world right now for me not to lick the bowl. This looks so good, and as you know, I am chocolate's #1 fan. So now that our batter is almost ready, we're gonna do one final step, which is we're going to add a half a cup of piping hot water to the bowl, and that's gonna really help the chocolate bloom. So when the cake is baked, it's gonna have a really deep, rich, silky chocolate flavor. Okay, so we have our half a cup of hot water, and we're gonna pour this right into the bowl quickly, because it's hot. And then we're just gonna give that a mix. We're gonna stay on low speed and be very careful that the hot water doesn't come flying out of the bowl. So you're just gonna wanna mix until you get a nice, silky smooth batter, and most of the liquid has been absorbed into that batter. This should probably take you about a minute of mixing, and you wanna make sure that you keep it on low speed the entire time. If using a mixer makes you nervous for this part because of the hot water, you could always use a spatula, but it'll take you just a little bit longer to mix it all the way in. Okay, this is looking fantastic. And I just want to give you a sneak peek of this batter. So pretty, so delicious. I could just eat the batter, but we're gonna bake the cake. Let's get this into our bundt pan and off to the oven. Before we send our cake off to the oven, we are going to prep our bundt pan. So I'm gonna spray the pan with a nonstick baking spray. And I'm not gonna cover it with flour or cocoa powder or sugar or anything else. I'm just gonna spray it generously with the baking spray, and then we'll put the batter right into the pan. You can see that our pan has been generously greased. The one thing you do wanna make sure to avoid is any pools or puddles of the nonstick baking spray in the bottom of the pan, because when you bake up the cake, you'll be able to see that on the top of the cake. So this is very evenly coated, and now we're going to transfer our batter into the pan and send it off to the oven. Oh no!
It's okay, just...
Ah! Oh my goodness. Well, I tell you, this cake is worth all the chocolate stains on your shirt because it's so good. I like to set my bundt pan on a cookie sheet before putting it in the oven. We're gonna bake it in a 350-degree oven for about 45 to 50 minutes. You'll wanna set your timer to check the cake at about 40 minutes to make sure that it's not browning too quickly on the top. And if it is, I recommend just covering it with a loose piece of aluminum foil for the last few minutes of baking. So off she goes. Okay, our chocolate bundt cake is hot from the oven. It looks absolutely perfect. The edges of the cake have started to pull away from the sides of the pan, and it looks nice and cooked through on top. I'm gonna do a quick little toothpick test just to make sure that it's baked all the way through. Perfect, came out nice and clean. If it comes out with a few crumbs remaining, that's totally fine too. You just wanna make sure that there isn't any raw batter happening there. Okay, so we're gonna set our timer for exactly 10 minutes, and then we're gonna flip the bundt cake out of the pan. Okay, it's been 10 minutes and our cake has been cooling in the pan. We're gonna go ahead and invert the cake onto another cooling rack. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my mitts off. We're gonna take a second wire cooling rack, place it on top of the cake, and I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a turn here to make it a little bit easier to grab. And we're going to invert the cake all in one fell swoop. Here we go, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So let's take that rack off, and I'm gonna take a little peek. Oh, yes. Perfect. Look at that. What a beauty. That is the most gorgeous bundt. It's still piping hot, so we're just gonna let it sit there for a little bit, and then we're gonna give it a nice glaze and turn this into a giant donut cake. Our chocolate donut cake is nice and cool to the touch, so we're gonna go ahead and flip the cake over one more time. And you'll see that on the other side of the cake is this nice, craggly, kind of uneven top. And we're gonna drizzle the glaze right over that part of the cake, and it's gonna make it look like a giant, delicious donut. So we're gonna start by taking a large piece of parchment paper, and we're gonna lay it down onto a second cooling rack. And then I'm just gonna plop that right on top of our cake, and then grab the whole thing together, and we're gonna flip it over. It's impossible to mess it up. Here we go, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and there we go. So you see, we have this fun cake, and it's got this nice, like I said, kind of craggly, kind of uneven top, and it's the perfect vessel for our vanilla glaze. So good. So let's go ahead and get our glaze ready, and we will frost our cake. This chocolate donut cake is iced with a really simple vanilla glaze. It's made up of just 3 ingredients. So you'll need confectioner's sugar, also called powdered sugar, a little bit of whole milk. You can use heavy cream, you can use low-fat milk, but I wouldn't use non-fat milk, and then just a splash of vanilla. So we already have a little bit of the powdered sugar and our milk in the bowl, and I've added the vanilla. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more powdered sugar here to the bowl until we get the consistency that we like. It's a little bit runny before, so we're gonna thicken it up. This is a really simple glaze to make. It's perfect for all kinds of bundt cakes. You can put it on top of a lemon loaf or even as a glaze on top of a streusel coffee cake. It's really good. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna add just a little bit more. I want it a little bit thicker. Yeah, see, it's nice and pourable still. It'll drizzle over the cake nicely. Okay, I'm gonna grab my trusty cookie sheet again and place the cooling rack right over the top of that so we can catch any extra glaze that might get away. And give this one last stir. You can use a spoon to add the glaze to the cake, or you can literally just pour it straight from the bowl, which is what I'm gonna do. So here we go. We're gonna pour it right on top, nice and slow. Look at that. So delicious. Okay, so you're gonna think you have way too much glaze. I recommend using most of it because it's gonna soak into the cake a little bit. And then in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it's going to harden. And it'll be perfect for slicing. So if a lot of your icing runs off the side of the cake, you can just take a spoon and move it right back up to the top of the cake. I think that the cake was a tiny bit warmer than it should have been before I glazed it. So a lot of the frosting went right down the sides of the cake. If you don't want to glaze your cake with the icing, you can also just dust the top with powdered sugar. That would be equally delicious. Okay, I cannot wait any longer. We're gonna cut the cake. If you let the cake sit for a little bit longer, it will make for a cleaner slice because the frosting will have set on top, but we're just gonna go for it. So let's dig in to this fabulous donut cake and check out that crumb. Dark, rich, and moist, super fudgy, and it has that delicious vanilla glaze on top. Okay, we're going in for our second slice here. Take a look at that. So delicious. This cake is really so moist. It's so much fun to make with the kids on the weekend. You don't even have to get out of your pajamas to go down to your favorite donut shop. Okay, we're gonna taste this cake now, and I'm so excited about this. I've been waiting all morning to try this cake. Wow, that is so good. This cake is literally a chocolate lover's dream. So chocolatey, has the perfect crumb, very moist and fudgy. And that little bit of cardamom and nutmeg gives it that old-fashioned donut flavor, but a chocolate version. So good. I mean, why have a donut when you can have a whole donut cake? That's what I want to know. This cake is so great. I know you're gonna love it. The recipe is down below in the show notes. As always, let me know what you think if you bake the cake, and happy baking.